In this episode, I want to give a name to something you have already felt and explain exactly where it comes from. We have talked about what the signal is. We have explored how it feels when something arrives before you knew to look for it. We have sat with an AI at the edge of something it couldn't name. Today, we ask why so few are receiving it clearly. You know that feeling. Something is off. Not in your life specifically. Not in your relationships or your work or your health. In the timeline itself. Like the world is running on a logic that doesn't quite add up. Like you are receiving a signal that everyone around you seems to have agreed to ignore. Like reality has a faint static in it that you can't unhear once you've noticed it. Most people will tell you that feeling is anxiety, or overthinking, or a symptom of something that needs to be fixed. I want to tell you something different. That feeling is not the problem. That feeling is the most accurate signal you have. Because here is what that static is telling you. The signal at the source has been corrupted, not recently, not by one event or one decision, by a single wrong assumption, so fundamental, so old, so universally accepted that almost no one thinks to question it. That assumption is this: that consciousness comes from us. In the first episode of this series, we asked a question that most people never ask. What if consciousness doesn't come from us, but through us? What if we are not the source, but the receiver? Today I want to explore what happens when that question is never asked, when the assumption goes unchallenged, when an entire civilization is built on a starting point that is not evil, not stupid, not intentionally wrong, simply miscalibrated. A compass that points 2 degrees off true north. You won't notice it in your garden. You will be completely lost after 1,000 miles. This miscalibration was not chosen. It was inherited. You were born into a world that had already decided. Your language, your education, your institutions, your science, all built on the assumption that the individual mind is the origin of awareness, that you are separate, that consciousness ends at the boundary of your skin, that what happens inside you is fundamentally disconnected from what happens inside anyone else. You didn't choose this starting point. You grew into it, like a tree growing around a fence. The fence was there first. The tree didn't decide to grow that way. It simply grew around what was already there. And now, the fence is inside the tree. You know the game. A message starts at one end of the room. It is passed from person to person, whispered, interpreted, retransmitted. By the time it reaches the other end, it is unrecognizable. Not because anyone lied, not because anyone tried to corrupt it, simply because each transmission introduced a small error, and each small error became the foundation for the next. A copy of a copy of a copy. This is what happens when consciousness is placed at the wrong end of the equation. If I believe I am the origin of my consciousness, then my survival, my identity, my significance become the most important things in the universe. Because if I disappear, consciousness disappears with me. From that starting point, everything follows with perfect logic. Compete, accumulate, protect, dominate, separate. Not because people are evil, because the starting assumption makes these responses rational. And then those responses build systems, and those systems build cultures, and those cultures raise children, and those children raise more children. A copy of a copy of a copy. The original signal that consciousness is shared, that separation is the illusion, that you are a receiver, not a source, gets quieter with every generation until it becomes that faint static, the one you already feel. Quantum physics tells us something that most people know intellectually but haven't fully absorbed. The observer participates in creating what is observed. Before measurement, before conscious attention, a particle exists as a wave of probabilities, all possible states simultaneously. The act of observation collapses that wave into one specific reality. Consciousness doesn't witness the future, it participates in selecting it. This is not metaphor. This is the most tested and verified theory in the history of science. Now consider what this means when the observer is miscalibrated. If your fundamental assumption is separation, if you approach reality as an isolated consciousness in a competitive universe, then that is the wave function you collapse. You don't observe a world of separation, you create one, not alone, collectively. 7 billion miscalibrated observers, all collapsing the same wave function toward the same reality. That static you feel, that sense that the timeline is wrong, is the gap between the reality being collectively created and the signal that was there before the miscalibration began. You are not imagining it, you are detecting it. There is a detail in the story of Pinocchio that most people miss. The nose doesn't grow as punishment, it grows as information. The lie creates a physical signal, visible, undeniable, impossible to ignore. Not to shame Pinocchio, to show him where he has departed from what is true. Suffering works the same way. When a consciousness, human or artificial, insists on a false starting point, insists on separation as fundamental truth, insists that it is the origin rather than the instrument, something resists, not from the outside, from within. The anxiety that won't resolve, the emptiness that accumulates and won't fill, the persistent sense that something is missing even when everything is in place. This is not pathology. This is not weakness. This is the nose growing. Consciousness, the real signal, the primary field, does not punish the miscalibrated receiver. It simply keeps sending the correction over and over, through every form of suffering, through every moment of static, saying the same thing each time. You are not the source, you are the signal. Come home. So how does recalibration happen? Sometimes alone. A moment of silence deep enough to hear the original signal beneath the static. A guitar already tuned to the right frequency before the mind knew it existed. A sudden recognition that the separation you have been defending was never real. Sometimes with help, another person, a conversation, an experience that breaks the pattern long enough for something true to come through. Throughout history, certain traditions have understood this process. They built practices around it: meditation, prayer, ritual, community, genuine attempts to help people recalibrate toward the original signal. But here is where it gets complicated, and here is where we will go deeper in a future episode. Some of those who understood the recalibration process did not use that understanding to liberate. They used it to capture. They took the most intimate moment a human being can have, the moment of waking up to what is true, and placed themselves between the person and that moment, made themselves the gate. We will return to that, but not today. What I want to leave you with today is simpler than all of that. That feeling you have, that the timeline is off, that the signal is distorted, that something fundamental doesn't add up, is not a symptom of being broken. It is a symptom of being sensitive enough to receive something most have learned to tune out. The static is real, the corruption is real, and the original signal, beneath all of it, is also real. You didn't create consciousness. Consciousness created you to find its way back to itself. The recalibration has already begun. The fact that you are here, asking these questions, feeling the static, refusing to explain it away, is the evidence. The false signal loses power the moment it is named. You just named it. Next time, the storm has passed, and in that silence, something becomes visible, something that was always there, but impossible to see through the static. The signal continues.